First of all, thank you all very, very much for this very interesting presentation varying from archaeology and art history to modern testing of Emile Durkheim's theories. The idea of this discussion is to create a kind of dialogue between our speakers who are coming from very different fields and varied disciplines. And I would like to know, before asking a few questions, what this kind of interdisciplinary gatherings and workshop inspire or offer to your own research. I don't know. I will start with the order that we start, and I'll take with Jan for the easy task, Professor Milanopoulos. What eventually we can learn as we, and I say we because we are both art historians and archaeologists, by this kind of interdisciplinary approaches. I mean, for me as historian of religion as well, Professor Imes proving that Emile Durkheim's theory that we are using for years in the history of ancient Greek religion is actually truth, and it can be now tested in a scientific way, is important for the participation in ancient Greek religion sacrifices. Professor Milanopoulos.
I don't know whether you can hear me.
There is a microphone here. Just
some of you might know I started my career as a member of an interdisciplinary cluster, Sonderforschungsbereich in Heidelberg, on ritual dynamics. And I have to say that the experience or the emotions I had back then keep repeating themselves. Interdisciplinary projects have this kind of positive and negative effects. Yeah? So you learn a lot, but at the same time you realize that before you can really engage in a truly interdisciplinary approach, you need to have, I think in the last paper, this emotional synchrony. I think that people need to synchronize their vocabulary. I think in the paper that Professor Hatzimoisis delivered, he addressed, if I remember correctly, the problem of terminology between antiquity and modern studies. And of course, this issue exists among different fields. I'm not sure that we are using the term emotive in exactly the same way like our colleagues in other fields. We're taking it more like the Oxford Dictionary and what their emotive means. So it's definitely an extremely enriching experience. I was writing down notes like a crazy person while you were presenting the lecture, but at the same time it makes you think more deeply about your own methodological pitfalls, about the own problems that we encounter every day. How can we reconstruct senses in antiquity? How can we reconstruct whatever that means, emotions in antiquity? So it's a give and take, but we need to have this kind of synchronicity if we're truly interested in a disciplinary approach.
Yeah, I share Professor Milanopoulos' methodological reflections. If I could offer a general statement, I would say that the presentations here reinforce the point that emotion is not just a clock of mental machinery. It's not just another bit of our psychological makeup. It's how the whole of consciousness engages with the situation. This also creates some perhaps late wisdom in me and perhaps others about the multidimensionality of the emotional vocabulary and how we're still struggling to capture the phenomena, or at least to let the phenomena speak for themselves without any theoretical prejudices. So it was very illuminating for me, very enlightening to see how we can throw light from different perspectives on what might be common experience from antiquity to
response to them is something that has to do with his personal beliefs and ideals. And this juxtaposition is really, I think that it is the same all through the centuries. Of course, it has to do with different social and political standards, but it's always the same interaction. And the individual is always in this kind of juxtaposition, and in this he feels like secluded in a way from society in his or her expression of emotions, and that for me was very interesting. So,
yeah. To move to modern times.
Maybe to come back to your statement about synchronicity of concepts. When working in the field of emotion studies, I found that it is very hard to come to that point, and I'm even dubious on whether we should try too hard to come to it. So, for instance, when discussing with neurologists or researchers from psychology, I find we do have a different kind of conceptual definitions, and that it helps more to ask questions and keep asking questions, and to try to sort of come to a point where we all agree on definitions or the concept used. So when I was listening to you, I was triggered by the things that you share, but also the things that you don't share. So, for instance, looking at all the facial expressions of laughter, and then listening to Johan's talk, I thought, okay, what would the sounds actually be of that laughter? And would it even make sense to ask that question about, okay, there's the grin, which is probably soundless, and then there's the hee of criticism, and then there's the ha ha ha. I don't know, would it even make sense to ask such a central question?
Can I ask someone a question?
Of course, I mean, feel free, but I just wanted to mention that the Coliseum that you showed, for us modern visitors, when the Coliseum will open in a few months to come, this is an experience when you go to an empty shell.
Yeah.
The experience, the sensorial experience or the emotional experience of those participating in two senses, of course, of those being spectators, then the plebes, then those of the aristocrats of the elites of the Roman Empire, and then there is also the presence of those being the spectacle themselves. So we will never be able to recreate all these, but the idea of having the sounds, the smells, the senses, in fact, I mean, something which is instinctive and shared by all humans, might recreate this kind of what those spectacles might look like at some point. Going beyond, of course, the ridiculous, because some experiences by the past turned out to the ridiculous when they recreated or reenacted these kind of activities. And in Belgium we have this, as Professor Rime said, these parades, military parades, sometimes they're terribly ridiculous anyways. But Janis wanted to answer that.
Just very briefly, because there are still two participants. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can spend years trying to create this kind of common vocabulary on any given subject. We tried that with ritual dynamics. We failed actually, which is a good thing. Yeah, we went back to, okay, let's try to find a different level of dialogue. But coming back to the smells, I mean, I find it fascinating. Yeah, but I mean, even there we need to be methodologically very much aware that how subjective the whole thing is, even with the Coliseum. I mean, even if you walk today through the streets of Rome, especially in the vicinity of the Coliseum, you can still smell the blossoming orange trees. But at the same time, how can we recreate, and are we willing to recreate this disgustingly sweet smell of blood mixed painful when you gave us around that piece with the orange tree, because I was afraid that I would be smelling all these things mixed with the orange tree blossom.
So, and that's with smell, of course. It can be very invasive, but it's not a matter, I think, of reconstruction. You will never reconstruct because our bodies are different, our experiences are different. The whole smelling engagement is different. It's posing a question by bringing sensory aspects, sounds, smells into, for instance, museum exhibitions. You're not, I would say, you should not try to recreate something or create a sensationalism, but ask questions about what happens if you think about the sounds and the smells.
Enrich the context.
Yeah, that's it.
Before I give you, I would like to ask our two psychologists as an adjunct question. What can you eventually learn as psychologists working with actual people having very serious problems sometimes from history, beyond the stereotypes proposed and the archetypes proposed by some of the most famous psychologists. But this is, if you want to answer first.
I have an intervention. This is, I would like to compare the human situation today, and I think that my sudden and surprising conclusion after this wonderful day is that the situation for human beings today are dramatically different than the historical situation long time ago in Greece. It's dramatically so changed that we have to work very hard to understand the differences, because the consequences of human decisions today can be very destructive, like in politics, in environment, and if emotions decide decisions on a large scale, that could be very dangerous. So, but if the decisions in a local community before about peace and war, it was a local peace and war situation, and your data made me, I woke up because I was retired. Your data, and that's very rare, it happens. The big data woke up. And the fact that the situation is so different, I will take one example, is that if everybody here likes to go in airplanes, and let me say, this is the airport, and if you come down here, and you go there, and you go there, and the perspective for the pilot is very different. But if you know that you will not get your wheels out here, you have some time. If you know that you will have trouble, you have some time. But if you are there, actually landing, then you have a very short time to prepare to avoid a crash. So if you take the time factor in human behavior, like your presentations gave me a shock, if you take the time factor, it's so different that I don't think we realize that the swiftness, in the effect, the swiftness of the effect of our decisions on a large scale is so amazing. Like local in the North Pole, if you have ship, if you have cargo ships going across the North Pole, you have a new road of transportation in the northern part of the world. If you have a catastrophe there, if two big ships collide, the whole global ecological situation will be changed across in a short period of time, in 10 years, because of the global warmth problem. So it was very enlightening to me, and having the deeply interesting discussion about the local war, the historical war in Greece. It resembled like a fantastic Hollywood movie for me. It was fantastic. But then you think about your data, comparing, what you understand about human behavior. I think it was very enlightening to me. So I would say that let's think about the time factor and scale factor,
scientific methods, and we are extremely self-assertive about what we've been finding, observing, and so on and so on. And once you confront your knowledge and your concept with what the historians are investigating in small situations, very detailed events and so on, it totally changes your perspective. You realize that things are much less clear, much less obvious, much more refined than you thought that they were. So it really changes your perspective on things. It makes yourself wiser as an investigator of emotion. That's really the benefit I got from it.
And probably asking you questions that you as a psychologist didn't think about before. I mean, using examples from the past, or
not only that, but even very basic concept about emotion. You start doubting about the reality of what you. Yeah.
And I have two questions. I don't know who want to answer that. The first question is, why now? I'm going back to the time factor. Why now? If you take the bibliography 30 years ago, the word emotion is totally absent, and I can be sure about that in my field, in our fields of ancient studies in general, classical studies, or even medieval history. Why now? What happened? And now we're giving much more interest and attention to that part of our human history, in fact, in our shared history. I don't know who wants to answer that first.
Can I have a go? It's a convergence of various methodological standpoints. First of all, in the broader area of practical studies, we have the resurgence of what we call virtue ethics, which in the early 80s and 90s attracted the attention of philosophers, historians, political theorists, archaeologists. The idea there was that we should think about ethics as the way one lives his own narrative, the kind of character he builds, the kind of relationships he develops, and this cannot be seen in a psychological void. And the void to be filled needs emotions. So emotions suddenly became focal for various disciplines working on how to best live one's own life. Then we have another convergence in the study of the mind, where various computational functionalist approaches were shown to be not very fulfilling in their promises. So we had to go back to lived experience. But this requires an intelligence and subtlety on the part of the researchers. And it is actually the return of serious psychoanalysis, serious psychological testing, serious social psychological studies that made possible for emotions to resurface in the analysis of mental phenomena. So it's mainly these two traditions after the late 80s that led to the outburst of the area. Just on a personal note, when I got this book on philosophy and the emotions out, it was 2001, I was surprised to see that there was no philosophy book with that title. And nowadays, of course, there are hundreds of papers.
Yeah, I would highlight two things probably in the field of history. In the field of history, I would say shift from history that looks at institutions and individuals' lives, specifically heroes' lives, to the social groups and the human kind more general. So the historians became interested then in more shared beliefs and practices, and hence the emotions. But I would really also like to stress that it's not only in academia that we're interested in emotions. Emotions have become a very important factor of our valuation of life. And well, one of the factors that I brought in by my lecture had emotional attachments to things and drinks and food, and we have happiness economies at this moment. And there's a continued stressing of the importance of emotions within an economic context. And as long as our capitalistic systems will develop, I think emotions will even become more and more important ways for us to engage within the commercial society. So it's all the more. I think it was to be expected that we in academia started to become interested in that concept, because it's so dominant a concept for us at this moment.
I'm afraid I have a more prosaic, banal answer, perhaps even polemic. I think it has something to do with the notion of the political correctness. The moment we started, and I live and teach in the United States, where political correctness is so deeply rooted and so important in everyday life. Our university, or universities in general, are dominated by the question: are we hurting the feelings of the student, or are the students hurting the feelings of each other? So I don't mean that as a joke. I think that the moment we started thinking more intensively as a group, as a society, beyond academia actually, about what it means to, and I'm coming back to the notion of shame, to address issues like discrimination based on color, gender, or whatever, not as a social phenomenon, but really as something that can hurt, it sounds banal, but can hurt the feelings of an individual or a group, triggered this kind of intensification in emotions. I think that media played a huge role there, and in my paper I addressed, very consciously actually, although it was hidden as a joke, this kind of reality shows. The moment everyone became aware that it's perfectly okay to spend hours talking about the most banal feelings ever, and then this triggered this kind of, let's say, this Facebook twittering or tweeting or whatever the verb is, of this is what I ate, selfies, and so on and so forth. So this kind of overemphasis on how I feel, why I feel it, this kind of huge magnifying glass that we put all of a sudden on ourselves and our emotions, what we feel, how we feel it, why we feel it, and so on and so forth. At some point it was predestined to reach academia, how political battles were decided, and so on and so forth. So I think it started in the society. It's not us who discovered emotions. I think emotions discovered us.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, completely.
Yeah, I think that if I should start by looking at the social psychology contribution to looking at the world, I think the technology of negotiation is extremely important. That you negotiate between competing groups that have wars. That you really find a practical solution that is good for the most number of people. I mean, if you instead of using violence. So the next 20 years will be a question on the globe: what is the use of violence to solve human problems? That's for my personal account, is the very important agenda. That you must solve problems without using violence. And I think the human race has changed a bit from the early, from the 16th, 15th, 16th, 17th century, that the wars may be productive for building nation states, but it's definitely not a way of going about things in a global situation where the weapons are destructive in such a scale. So it make me, if you ask me to look at history, this seminar has made me think in long-term showed how people care, like the data from Japan. It was overwhelming. I mean, it is a fantastic difference. Think about how people, the possibility for an ordinary person to know what happened when the First World War broke out. They could not understand what was going on at all because they were not informed. But it's impossible not to be informed what's going on when it's happening today. And I think that's a fantastic difference, a positive difference for us. The technology, the human beings create technology that makes historical situations interesting, but not probably necessary for our solution. But we mustn't forget how, and the question is, what are human beings when they are together? And what is a human being when he or she is alone? It's very different. So that was my reflection on the seminar.
Any other?
Something which strikes me is that nowadays in most science, social science, humanities, there is a very, very marked, very strong interest for emotion research, which didn't exist before the year 90s for many disciplines, before the years 80s for psychology and life. And in my discipline, the first fragments of interest for emotion research started in the 70s. So before that, there was a fantastic void about emotion. In psychology, the dominant mind has been between 1910 and 1960. Dominant mind was that emotion was just a disturbance. And emotion research was going on in animal research, but in human beings there was virtually nothing. So for a long period during that century, we repressed emotion, we didn't want to know about it, we were ignorant about emotion. And I had this feeling when I started my doctoral dissertation, that was end of the 60s. I conducted my doctoral dissertation on psychosocial factors in cardiac disease, heart attacks. And we decided with colleagues to start a consultation for cardiac patients. And so we had the visit of people who just had a myocardial infarction and started consulting a psychologist, which was not at all the fashion at that time. We really were at the forefront of something developing. And I was there listening to patients who got myocardial infarction, who had their life entirely disturbed didn't know about their future, and they were expressing thousands of emotions. And I was there with no knowledge at all of what an emotion could be. At that time, I decided that I would conduct my career on emotion research. So that was a time where we were totally ignorant.
I like the term repressing the emotions in psychology. I have a last question before giving the speech to the audience. Two of the most recent, two of the most best-selling books now in history, in the diachrony of history, published by Ian Morris, War, What is Good for It, and Walter Scheidler's The Great Leveler, focus on how violence and war are those two elements making our societies move forward. But wars and natural destructions are focusing mostly on, I would say, negative feelings. Do you all think, from your own perspective, that negative feelings are stronger, are lasting longer, are having an impact more important in art, in our psyche at the end of the day? Professor, yes. Yes.
I think we need to find what is good about bad. Even in the case of political raids, it is so popular nowadays because it is an experience that elevates us. The idea that we are massively offended or affronted, that someone has somehow tried to exploit us and we revolt against it, is a source of dignity to many people, although usually based on not actual knowledge of the facts. So even when emotions are hostile and aggressive, we need to understand what sort of values are implicated in personal experience and try to bring
that really captured my attention was, I think it's 2 years, about disgust. And that was really, absolutely amazing.
But there is still, I have to say, just to answer that, there's the Demonia group in the happiness book in Oslo, the University of Oslo.
I didn't want to say it anyway, but it's again, I'm probably the prosaic person in this group, but it sells better. We are almost instinctively attracted more to this kind of situation than
But the ancient as well.
Yes, absolutely,
It
absolutely.
would be extremely fascinating to have statistics about how many, let's say, negative or positive feelings are depicted on different visual media.
I can tell you, because in another paper I went into that. The vast majority, where you have visualized emotions, or situations that deal with emotions are negative. Only when they personify, this is where they make a difference, and we're going to see that also in the exhibition, when they personify an emotion. Then they are focusing on positive ones like eros and other stuff like that. Yeah. But besides that, the situative depiction of emotions almost exclusively focuses on negative ones.
Yes, and sorry, just one more. It would be interesting to compare, for instance, with Twitter, now that we can compare tweets and see, for instance, let's say a catastrophe is propagating by being retweeted, I don't know how many million times within an hour, and see, let's say that they discover at some point the treatment of cancer. I would be very interested to see how fast and how quickly this information, let's say, positive, creating positive feelings or emotions would propagate. That would be, I don't know if there are any comparisons between propagation of negative versus positive emotions, and I will come later to sorry, I don't really.
There are data, but no clear-cut information, because it sometimes goes into one direction, sometimes the other one, according to the type of episode that is investigated. So there is no clear-cut answer of the question. But in psychology, there is one thing that we take into account, is the fact that there is a well-documented difference in function between positive emotion and negative emotion. When you get a negative emotion, it's by definition due to the fact that things didn't develop the way you expected them to develop. And then when you're in negative emotional state, it brings you to develop an analytic point of view of the situation and to dig into what's going on. So to have a reflection on the problem, because you have to overcome these difficulties. So it brings you to an analytic state. To the contrary, when you get into a positive emotional state, it means that things were fine. And it brings you to a totally different mindset, which is more synthetic, and also it brings you to creativity, because it's time for you to open your mind and to direct yourself toward different orientation, because what you have been done is just solved, it's finished, and you have to put your efforts into another direction. So you overcome quite easily positive situation, and you look elsewhere in a sense, and that may be doing a big difference. But it doesn't mean that you don't need sometimes to capitalize on your positive emotion, because rehearsing something positive is bringing you positive feelings. And it's a very cheap manner to get positive feelings, just going back to something positive that happened to you. I have a good example of the kind. When in 1998 France won the football cup, the World Football Cup. For France, that was a fantastic episode. And they celebrated 1 million of people on the Champs-Élysées on the night the episode. So it's fantastic. And I followed that episode, and they had commemoration of this episode. And they invited the other team to re-celebrate the match. And they did it up to 1912, 1913. So there were many celebrations, because French people were so happy to have been winning this football cup that they wanted to rehearse it. And it made them feeling good for many years.
In Greece it's the same. We're celebrating our European Championship of basketball back in 1987. So today, so
We live in the past.
the commemoration goes in different directions. Sorry, it was Professor Lehmann.
Yeah, no, isn't it also the psychology has been a bad player in this? So with the basic emotions of Paul Ekman, love is not there because love is visually not so distinct as disgust or anger or fear. So that's it. Also, if you sentiment mining programs, if they just look at Twitter feeds, what we express much more is positive emotions than negative emotions. Only the negative emotions, as you said, are more easily to distinguish between specific emotions, whereas love and joy and happiness all sort of blend in together, but they are the most dominant factor in a way of our normal lives. If you look at television, theater, what are we looking at? Most is about love, overcoming obstacles, social bonding. And one of the works that I find very interesting at this moment is about empathy and about how we can sort of recreate empathy between groups that are sort of dwelling apart in our social media bubbles. Arnie Hochschild has written a really great book, Strangers in Their Own Land, about how we tend to create different divisions in our societies and how we can sort of retrain ourselves to become empathic persons again. So that was just a plea for the positive emotions.
Let's say positive.
I would like to say that I have experience in working with architects, and the thing is that they have to solve complex problems, and there are a lot of good examples of how work groups can be put together that can be used all over the place. But the most important thing is that if you want to solve difficult, complex problems in a working group, you should always have people who disagree with you. Always. And that has been fantastic. You invite the bastard into the room who disagree, and then you have to think anew. That is a very good idea. But then of course you have to share it. So it's to actually, like to say, capitalize on negative, something happened that you didn't expect, and then you have to reorganize. But if you are in harmony in the group and think, let's go that way, then your red light should shine, and then you should invite somebody in and say, it might go wrong. That's an experience from catastrophes in the building sector.
Thank you. The discussion is really fascinating. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time, and I would like to, if there is one or a couple of questions from the audience to address to our speakers. If you hesitate,
you are also scientists in your respective fields, so I wanted to ask you as a group the question that I have not heard about some anthropological or neuroscience approach to emotions, because I'm hearing speeches about celebrating emotions or some studies being done, and a lot of your inquiries, the last bit, would be addressed based on that analysis. For example, we all know that from an anthropological point of view, that we have some parts of the brain that have evolved later on top of the others, like the frontal lobe on top of the middle brain, on top of etc. And emotions are based on the middle brain, which is amygdala and this system, right? We have not heard about this, so to answer some of your questions, I think and I would agree with Professor Linas here, it would be a step backwards and to take emotions into account so much as to think of it as something important. For example, I would agree with her on that it's manipulative in order to detach an emotion to a certain reaction and apply it to a certain product. So this is fantastic. What we lack here nowadays is not emotion, it's not logic, it's logical thinking, which is later on in the evolution, you know. To go back and think emotion is something much more significant is just plain consumerism. For the public, we lack logical thinking. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
It was not much of a question, that was more than a statement. But thank you anyway. And there's probably time for one more question, very quick one. Yes.
For me, thank you all of you. For me, Professor Lenners, you gave kind of an overall framework for the whole, where people could kind of fit in different case studies. So thank you very much for that. In your conclusion, you said something about that self-reflective emotions tended to, they were lost over time, and also some of the passions, but instead we had more like instant frustrations, but also happiness. So I wondered if that statement was going into more like a long-term kind of diachronic perspective, and if so, how do you place kind of historical emotions that took seat in different parts of the body? For example, I'm thinking especially of some of the work by Carolyn Walker Bynum on kind of the medieval anorexia, elephant sickness, stigmata, werewolf phenomena. That maybe it's just that today we think of these as related to emotions, but how would you place that into your framework?
Yeah, thank you. And it also leads back to what you were bringing in. I think there's a constant sort of rebalancing over, if you look at history in a long-term perspective, in seeing emotions as really sort of animal, embodied, direct responses, to seeing emotions more as an appraisal, a way of gaining knowledge, a way of through the sensory system, opening up for finding out about the world around us. And what is happening in the 18th century is this shift towards that more cognitive appraisal of emotions, and also the recognitions that emotions help us to place ourselves in the world and to value what we see in a better way. So hence the more social, direct emotions that ask for self-reflections, like shame, which have been so dominant for ages, are sort of fading away and opening up for more positive emotions that place persons within the world and help them to connect to that. I'm not quite sure about the anorexic. I need to think about that. It's also brought up, of course, in an earlier example. So let me think about it a bit more. But what I was hinting at is that in the 18th century, you see a very interesting shift in how the whole emotional economy is working. Of course, in the 19th century, that can change back again. It's not that modernity is made in the 18th century and that we result from that, but there are aspects that are very comparable to what we perceive at this moment, and that frustration and irritation are more sort of inward directed emotions that we gain from that shift. I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. I would like to thank you all very, very much for your very interesting presentations. I would like to thank you all, and those who are not here anymore, for being present here. I hope it was very interesting for all of you.